Grace to you all this morning and peace from God our Father, from our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. Let's see what we got here. I'm looking at the altar and I see that there's something hiding. It's like a treasure hunt or something. Speaking of air and the Holy Spirit, suppose that means nothing. So you ever think about this? Like every Sunday you come to church and there on the altar there's this white cloth and we have stuff hiding under the cloth and something in a basket and something in a bottle. And, oh look. What's that? Bread. That's right, it's just bread. We see it every week. And there it is, just bread. Now I know your theology tells you something in addition to this just bread, that there's something more to it, but not yet. Barbara makes our bread. Barbara and Sonia make our bread every week, right? What's in it?
Flour.
Flour.
Honey.
Honey.
Baking powder.
Baking powder.
Oil and milk.
Oil and milk. That's pretty simple. Flour, honey, baking powder, oil, and milk to make this communion bread, which tastes pretty good, I think. But it's just bread. That's kind of a diabolical little word, isn't it? That little four-letter word that we use so often without even thinking about it. That word that kind of springs to mind without much consciousness on our part. I'm talking about that little four-letter word that we hear all the time, the word just. Just. When we use it to minimize or trivialize something. Ever have somebody say, can you just come here for a second? And you know it's not going to just be a second. Or can you just do this favor for me? And you're like, uh-oh, here we go. You know it's going to be much bigger. The word just is to lure us into a sense of comfort and security. But we know that it doesn't really work that way. It's a way to kind of divert us from what's really happening. It's kind of a diabolical little word in that way. The word just. I just need you to do this for me. I just need some help with this. I just need a second. Oh, it's nothing special. It's just whatever. It's just bread. Just bread. And some people will say that later on when we bless this bread together as a community of faith gathered around Christ, it becomes something more than just bread. But others will say, not really, it's just bread. And that if we examine it, we'll find out it's still just bread. And that's part of the problem with people of faith, people who are religious. They want to take something that's just something and make it something else, which it isn't necessarily. It's just bread as we gather together to worship this morning. And God is just God and you're just you. A moment of Olympic trivia. See if you've been following the Olympics. Can you guess who this is? Anybody?
Bolt.
Usain Bolt, the fastest man in the world. And I loved listening to him after he ran and won gold medal in the 100 meter and the 200 meter, and he exceeded all of his competitors. He's an amazing runner. If you haven't had a chance to see him, you really should. His ability to run is a real treat and a testimony to our human bodies and what they can accomplish. And what I'm also impressed with, and a little turned off by, is the way he talks about himself after the race. I am the greatest athlete in the world. I am a legend. As Bob Costa said last night, anchoring the Olympics just before signing off, he said, there's hardly anything we can say about Usain Bolt that he hasn't already said about himself. We'll leave it at that. I don't think this is accidental on his part. I think he knows that he's accomplished something wonderful, and probably the people of Jamaica need somebody of his stature to help raise up their own impression of themselves as this little island nation, that here the fastest man in the world comes from Jamaica. But I also picture as a kind of a balance to all of that You see him going back to his mama in the islands, and his mama saying to him, you know you sin, I'm very proud of you, but remember, you're just Usain. Only your mama can do that to you, right? You're just who you are. You're just Usain. You're just you. Just you. The problem that Jesus encounters in his work with the people. He's just fed a huge crowd on a hillside. Over 5,000 people. And they were so attracted to this miracle that he did for them that they wanted him to do another one. In fact, several other ones, 3 times a day, so they'd never have to work for their food again. And Jesus says, you know, you're focused on this miracle because I filled your belly. But my ministry, my work that the Father has sent me to do is more than filling your bellies. It's filling your soul. Filling your soul with a different understanding of what is bread, what is life-giving, what we need. And as he starts to raise the people's vision to something greater, you can feel the crowds and then those with religious authority trying to pull him back down to earth. You can almost hear them saying, come on, Jesus, what's all this talk about bread? It was just lunch. And then in our reading from John's Gospel for this morning, you can hear those Jewish authorities looking at this man, talking about bread and how important it is for us to have a spiritual kind of bread that will strengthen and nourish us. And what do they say? Him. That's just Jesus. We know his mother and father. We know everything about him. It's just Jesus. And there's that devilish little word creeping in again. Oh, he's nobody special. He's just Jesus. And you're just who we are. And we're just gathered on a Sunday morning because we have no place better to be, or because this is what we do out of habit, or something pulled us here, and later on we're just going to have some bread and wine, and we'll all leave and be satisfied. That's just what it is. But it isn't. It isn't at all. It's so much more than that. It's so much more important than that. It's so much more critical than that. It's so much more nurturing than that. It's so much more blessed than that. We're not just gathering together on a Sunday morning for the heck of it. We're here to be present to God so that God can bring us healing and encouragement and let us know that we are more by the grace of God than we might just think we are or other people think we are. The message seems to be, never let anybody tell you that you're just you. Because with the power of God, you are so much more than that. And who you are is sufficient for God's purposes. Can you imagine that? Imagine that about you for just a moment. That who you are, who you are created to be, and who life has formed you to be is more than sufficient for God's purposes. Now you might say, oh, wait a minute. I'm not famous. None of us are in the Olympics. I'm not particularly gifted. I'm not particularly handsome. You may argue with me about many of these things. I'm just me. But it's just you in cooperation with an amazing God who can do wonderful things through you for the sake of the world. It's just you in cooperation with an amazing God who can do wonderful things through you for the sake of the world. There sat Elijah on that very sad and despondent morning under the broom tree, and he prayed that God might take his life, because as he looked at the contest that he had just been through with those who were faithless to God and won, and yet now the queen wanted him assassinated, Elijah sat under the tree all alone, saddened by the threat to his life, and he said, God, just let me die, because nobody loves you. It's just me. That's what he said. It's just me. Now Elijah has to go through another experience of God's presence and power. Even though he just had one, he needs another one. And in that other additional experience of God's presence and power, God says to Elijah, he says, Elijah, it's not just you. It's never just you. Did you know that I know of 7,500 people in Israel who are just like you, who have not given up, who keep the faith? And think about this, Elijah, God says to him. You and me and those 7,500 people are going to change my people Israel. And they do. And they absolutely do. But at that moment, in his life, with all the pressure coming down on him, with the deep-seated fears of his future, Elijah said to God, it's just me. And when we have those moments in our lives, hopefully you can hear God's voice coming to you and saying, it's not just you. It's you and me. And that's enough. So let's try and get rid of that little word that we use too often in response to ourselves and to other people, to the world around us, because we don't want to get our hopes too high. What if Usain Bolt had gone to the Olympics, and apparently the hype that was promoted by him and around him started way before the Olympics? Well, what if he went to the Olympics and he said, I'm just going to try my best. I'm just going to run a pretty good 100-meter race. What if he had said that? I'm just going to show up. You never would have known his name. I don't know how many, there were like 8 or 9 people in the 100-meter finals. How many of their names do you know? You know, Usain Bolt, maybe 1 or 2 others. If he had said, I'm just going to do the best I can, you never would have heard of him. But it was because he felt that he could do better. And Steve Schoner and I were talking about this earlier today, lest you get the wrong idea about this gentleman. Do you notice what he does just before the race starts? Anybody notice what he does? Anybody notice?
He looks up and points to heaven.
He crosses himself, that's right. At that moment, it's not just Usain Bolt anymore, is it? It's Usain Bolt in his faith in what God can do through him. It's never just you or me. It's not just bread, sisters and brothers. Jesus says, I am the living bread that comes down from heaven. It's not just bread that we take in our hands as we celebrate communion, or wine that we take into ourselves as we celebrate this meal. It's the very presence of our Savior, here to bless us and to grace our lives and to remind us that it's not just you. It's you and God. Jesus says to those who are listening to him, who are still in the conversation, I am the living bread that comes down from heaven. I'm not just lunch. I am living bread. You ever see dead bread? We had some in the pantry the other day. Well, it wasn't dead yet, but it was getting old because it had a beard. And we threw it out because you don't eat dead bread. It's not good for you. Jesus says, I'm not that kind of bread that can go bad. He says that to the Hebrews who are listening to him, the Jewish people who are listening to him. He says, I'm not like that manna. You had it for a day and it was gone. That wasn't living bread. That was dead bread. I am living bread. I am always present, always bringing the gift of life and love. Always there for you. Sisters and brothers, we're not just gathered this morning. We are gathered by God's Holy Spirit. And it's not just us. It's each one of you, saints of God, gathered in this place to realize again that you are gifted with God's presence in your life. To realize again that you are claimed in the life, death, and resurrection for wonderful things. To experience again God's blessing. To be leaven out there in the world. To make a difference. I want people to just come and see this community of faith and the impact that you have on so many lives for your witness and your generosity. It's not just us. It's us and God. And that's an unbeatable combination. It's not just bread. It's not just wine. It's the presence of the living Christ given for us. Let nobody use that 4-letter word when they speak to you. And use it of nobody else. It's never just what it seems. But it's always what God makes it to be. Beyond our expectations. Thanks be to God. Amen.